everyone, welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and how am I going to fix my commander decks? I did a video a couple months back ranking all my commander decks. I usually like to do an annual video talking about my personal commander decks, and there I actually ranked them in order of how much I like to play them. And all the decks at the bottom, I had 3 decks at the bottom of that list that I was either not having a lot of fun playing because I lost a lot, or I was just sort of bored with what they were doing. And I decided rather than abandon them, I would try to fix them. So in this video, I'm going to go over how exactly I fix those decks. So for me, this is a learning experience, sort of a deck building thing that you can take from where maybe you have a deck and you really, really like it a lot. You really like that commander, and how can you improve upon it? What different directions can you go? These are the different directions I went with these specific commanders. So my least favorite commander from that list was Reign Academy Chancellor. And not because I don't like the card. I do like it. I think it's a great commander. I also think it's a great card in the 99 as well, because whenever you or a permanent you control becomes a target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you get to draw a card. That's pretty darn good. You could put this in any commander deck and it's going to draw you some cards for sure. You may draw an additional card if Reign Academy Chancellor is enchanted. So of course, if I'm actually building around this commander, that's what I want to be doing. And this is just a very nostalgic card for me from way back in the day. I always really love the art as well. Of course, it's a very underwhelming commander, so right up my alley. And I really liked the challenge of building this deck. And I really went deep into the enchantment theme, and maybe too much. When I first made this deck, I wanted to do basically mono blue enchantment aura tribal, right? And that's what I did. I had a whole lot of auras in the deck. I had a few creatures in the deck that want to be enchanted, like Thran Golem. That's a funny old card. Still have that in the deck. It is a pretty good fit there. Rootwater Matriarch I had in there, which I can tap it to gain control of target creature as long as it's enchanted. So I can now use my auras on my opponent's creatures if I want to gain control of them. I had Rootwater Shaman in there, which lets me cast auras at instant speed. So I really went deep down the aura enchantment theme. And funny enough, I just made a video about mono blue commanders that have sort of fooled me. And this kind of was one of them a little bit. This was a commander that I thought I could make a really interesting mono blue aura deck with. And then on top of that, do a little bit of a draw theme as well, because I am drawing lots of cards, and it just didn't play out as well as I had hoped. One of the big issues, I mean, there's a couple big issues. First of all, this is my most monolith commander deck. As I talk about on my channel all the time, a monolith commander is a commander that I gotta have it out in order for my deck to really be doing anything. And that is the case with my Reign Academy Chancellor deck. I really need my Reign in play in order for this deck to work at all. Doesn't do a whole lot without her in play. The other issue, of course, the most obvious hoop that needs to be jumped through here is that I need my opponents to target my stuff, right? And they can just forego targeting my stuff and I won't draw any cards and my deck won't do a whole lot. Now, that's not a bad thing. Obviously, your opponent's not targeting you with any removal or anything. Obviously, that's good. That's an upside. But I really built the deck around wanting my opponents to do so. And if they don't, I don't get the draw triggers. A lot of the stuff in the deck doesn't work. I do have Spellskite in the deck. I have Misdirection in the deck. I do have ways to force my opponents to target my stuff. So that does work there. I got a little bit of that. But again, the pieces really have to come together where I have to have my commander in play, an aura on it, and then I have to have that Spellskite or that Misdirection type of effect that will then force the trigger. A lot of hoops to jump through to draw 2 cards, right? What I decided to do to fix this deck is do more of a wizard tribal sort of scenario. One of the cards that I had in the deck already was Sigil Tracer. 1 blue merfolk wizard 2/2. Pay 1 and a blue, tap 2 untapped wizards you control, copy target instant or sorcery spell. You may choose new targets for the copies. So it does sort of work in the deck with a lot of the spells that are flying around. Mostly I put it in the deck because I have a commander that is a wizard that's just sort of sitting there. It's not doing anything, right? It's one of those commanders that I just want that static ability that it has, or that triggered ability, I guess. And other than that, it's just sitting there. So with Sigil Tracer in play, I can now tap my Sigil Tracer, which is a wizard, and my Reign Academy Chancellor to use this ability. And what I realized is maybe I could go down that road a little bit more and do a little bit of wizard tribal in this deck. And that's what I ended up doing. I ended up adding a few cards like Patron Wizard, Docent of Perfection, right? These are wizard tribal-y sort of cards that will work in the deck and give me a little bit of a backup for my plan. It doesn't hurt the theme that I'm already doing. I think it does fit, but it is turning, first of all, my commander into a more formidable creature and making it more usable, but it's also a little bit of a backup for what I'm doing, right? Galecaster Colossus is another one that I put in the deck that is just going to benefit me from having, I would say, a fairly decent amount of wizards in the deck, including my commander, right? Again, just with my commander and the Galecaster Colossus in play, I can tap those guys to bounce permanents. I don't need 20 wizards in play to make Galecaster Colossus good, right? All I need is itself. It itself is a wizard, and then my commander as well. Now I can be bouncing 2 non-land permanents every turn. That seems pretty darn good, right? So that is what I decided to do to help fix that deck, is do a little bit of a wizard tribal sub theme, and I think it's gonna work. Next up, we have my Shannas Legacy deck, which is a deck that I was really excited about when I first started making it, because I was going in a very unique direction, right? Just like what I do with my 5 unique builds for 5 commanders videos, where I'm taking a commander and I'm going in a bit of a different direction than you would typically expect, right? So Shanna is white and a green, a human warrior, 0/0, can't be the target of abilities your opponents control, and has +1/+1 for each creature you control. So of course, counts itself. If it's the only creature in play, it's going to be a 1/1. So of course, you look at this and you're like, okay, well, I want to make my commander huge. So I put a bunch of creatures in play. It gets bigger. So I'm in sort of a go tall Voltron-y strategy. And I think that's what a lot of people do, is I just make a huge commander that I can attack with. But also I'm in a go wide strategy as well. And of course, I kind of did that, but I didn't want to just be attacking with my commander. I wanted to do something else. And I thought, why not take advantage of the fact that I have a commander that is possibly really, really big, but also really, really cheap. And a great way to take advantage of that is with cards like Greater Good. So now I can sacrifice my commander. If it's an 8/8, I can draw 8 cards, discard 3. So now I'm up 5 cards for essentially only 2 mana, and then I can recast my commander. I'm taking advantage of the fact that my commander is super cheap so that I can cast it over and over again and then sacrifice it over and over again, right? Momentous Fall is another card I have in the deck. Draws you a bunch of cards, but also gains you life. Life's Legacy is one that will draw you cards equal to sacrifice creature's power. Obviously, I could just put cards in the deck like Traverse the Outlands, which is going to search your library for up to X. Basic land cards where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So if my commander is really big, I can get a ton of lands off of it. I can also make my team bigger by sacrificing my commander with cards like Feed the Pack and Mercy Killing. These are both really neat includes in the deck where I sacrifice my commander to create tokens equal to its power or toughness. And then when I get my commander back, of course, it's even bigger. I essentially have doubled its size. So those are really neat fits in the deck. I really went with the token theme, right? What I decided to do originally was, okay, the easiest way to get a whole bunch of creatures into play quickly and cheaply is with tokens. So I had a lot of token generators in the deck, specifically creatures that created tokens. And what ended up happening is I put Parallel Lives in there, I put Anointed Procession in there, and it really just became a Selesnya token deck at the end of the day. I sort of got away from what my commander was supposed to be doing. It was really supposed to be more of an aristocrats. I sacrificed my commander or even some of my other creatures over and over and over again. That was more the deck. It wasn't really supposed to be a token theme at all. And I really kind of got bored with it. What I ended up doing is just making a go wide strategy, token theme. I run over my opponents. It kind of became really boring. Not the kind of deck I really like to play. It wasn't bad. I still won games with it. I just wasn't really enjoying it. So I set it aside and I was gonna completely scrap it and just never touch it again. And then a couple of cards came out recently that made me rethink the strategy for that deck. That being Cosmic Rebirth. This is one of my favorite cards that have come out this year. This to me is just an auto include in any white-green deck. Came out in March of the Machine's Aftermath. 1 green and a white instant. Choose target permanent card in your graveyard. If its mana value is 3 or less, you may put it onto the battlefield. If you don't put it onto the battlefield, put it in your hand, you gain 3 life. So nice little added bonus there with the gain 3 life. That certainly isn't necessary. This still would be an auto include for me in every white and green deck, even without the life gain thing. I choose a permanent in my graveyard at instant speed and put it directly onto the battlefield if its mana value 3 or less is obviously fantastic. And even if it's not, even if it's a Smothering Tithe that I just want to get back, it just goes back to my hand and can play it again. In any deck where your commander is mana value 3 or less, that you're in these colors, it seems like just a slam dunk for me. And of course, as soon as I saw this card, I thought, well, that would be a phenomenal fit in my Shanna deck if I was still playing it, because I wasn't really playing it. I had actually sort of stolen some cards out of it. You know how you do sometimes? You kind of get tired of a deck, so you start scavenging cards out of it, and it's not really a complete deck anymore. It's just kind of lying around. And the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, man, why don't I do more of this? Why didn't I do this to begin with? More of the I cheat my creature back into play rather than I recast it from the command zone. For some reason, I thought I just want to be getting my commander out of the command zone. I got Command Beacon, I got Road of Return, cards like that, and then I can cast my commander again. Why does the I recur or I reanimate really cheap creatures well? In fact, one of my favorite cards of all time is Return to the Ranks, which I'm shocked I didn't have this in that deck before. Return X target creature cards with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Again, in any deck where you got a commander that's 2 or less seems pretty darn good, because at the very least, you can get your commander back. It also has Convoke, so I can get a whole bunch of creatures back. And so I started doing that research as well. Guardian Savior is a card that came out that I never had in the deck before, and I probably should have. When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, return up to 2 target creature cards with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this gets my commander out of the graveyard. Sarah Paragon, which came out last year, will get my commander out of the graveyard, right? The mana value 2 or less, mana value 3 or less theme is something that white does really well. And in fact, even white and green does it pretty darn well. Renegade Rallier is a card that I can't believe I didn't have it in my deck before. 1 green and a white human warrior 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, if a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn, return target permanent card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So again, another card that so perfectly gets my commander back out of the graveyard after I sacrifice it. And of course, if I just sacrificed it to some effect, that's going to trigger my Renegade Rallier and very easily gets it back into play. So that's what I ended up doing. I abandoned the token creation theme entirely, and I'm not worrying so much about having a giant army in play. It's just more of a recursion theme. So for that reason, of course, I'm going to put a lot of other cards in the deck as well, like Haywire Might and Cathar Commando, which are creatures that I want to be getting back in my graveyard, right? I sacrifice them to destroy artifacts or enchantments, and then I can get them back with any of my recursion effects that work with those little creatures. And of course, lots of those available in these colors, right? Sakura Tribe Elder, Selfless Spirit, already cards that you could just put in any commander deck. Just so happens to be 2 mana creatures that I want to be sacrificing that I can get back. So I went with more of a sacrifice theme, which funny enough is kind of what I used to do in my Safi Eriksdottir deck. Back in the day, I had a Safi Eriksdottir deck, which did that a little bit. It had a lot of those creatures like Sakura Tribe Elder and Selfless Spirit that I could sacrifice, but sacrifice my Safi Eriksdottir to get them back and then sort of recast my Safi Eriksdottir, get it back out of the graveyard. I did sort of a same thing there. And of course, Safi Eriksdottir is another card that I put in this deck, which works really great here, whether I want to use it on my commander or use it on one of my other creatures that I want to get back. So I ended up doing a similar thing there, where I did what I was doing in my Shanna deck already, but I also incorporated that Safi Eriksdottir sort of strategy where I have a whole bunch of little creatures I want to be sacrificing all the time as well. And I really like the finished product. And most importantly, it is now a deck that I really enjoy playing. Really happy with the result here. And finally, another deck that I was kind of disappointed in, but I had mentioned in that video already that I was considering going in a different direction, was my Gerard Weatherlight Hero deck. 2 red and a white human soldier, 3/3 with first strike. When Gerard Weatherlight Hero dies, exile it and return to the battlefield all artifact and creature cards in your graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn. As I've pointed out several times before talking about this deck, I thought it was fairly obvious where you wanted to go with this commander. I thought it was actually going to be a pretty popular build around. People don't really love it. I originally went with the basically board wipe tribal theme, where I got a bunch of creatures and artifacts in play that either have really good ETBs or they have good dice triggers. I actually want them to die, right? Of course, a sad robot being the perfect example there of a creature that not only does it have an ETB, but it also has a dice trigger. And then I'm casting board wipes. I'm casting lots and lots and lots of board wipes. And not just the board wipes that kill creatures, the board wipes that are killing artifacts, enchantments, everything. I'm wiping the board. Of course, all my opponents are going to lose a bunch of stuff. All my stuff, including my commander, will die. I exile my commander from my graveyard and then return all my creatures and artifacts to play. And of course, I'm getting the dice triggers and the ETBs and all that all over again. Just fantastic value. I did not lose a lot of games with this deck in that strategy, but of course it wasn't a whole lot of fun. And when I started actually playing with my patrons on my Discord with this deck, I took a lot of the board wipes out. I lessened the power because I wanted to make the deck a little funner to play against. And because I did that, I sort of ruined the original strategy, right? The deck didn't really work nearly as well without all those board wipes in. I still got the value, right? I still had Goblin Welder and all that stuff in there where I would keep revisiting those artifacts, getting value off of them and whatnot, all those other slingshot effects like face reward, backups for my commander essentially. I was getting a lot of great value, but I wasn't getting a huge advantage off of it because I didn't have that added bonus of I'm destroying all my opponent's stuff. So unfortunately, I made the deck a lot worse. It also was a little bit less fun to play, so I decided to go in a different direction. And as I have talked about recently, Lulu, Loyal Holy Fant, is one of my favorite commanders from last year. 3 and a white Elephant Angel, 3/2 with flying at the beginning of your end step. If a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on each tapped creature you control, then untap them. And I know you're looking at this and you're going, what the heck does this have anything to do with Gerard, right? Not a whole lot on its face. However, as I was experimenting with this commander, and I went in a bunch of different directions, you can go check out that video where I talk about all the different interesting directions you can go with this commander. Of course, it pairs with a background, so any color combination you can use. I ended up making a white-black version that I posted on that video, and the one I was making for myself was a white-red version with Guild Artisan. 1 and a red background. Commander creatures you own have, whenever this creature attacks a player, if no opponent has more life than that player, you create 2 treasure tokens. So I'm in a white-red deck, so now we're getting closer to the Gerard deck. And also I'm creating treasure tokens. And why this works really, really great with Lulu is because, of course, sacrificing those treasure tokens to just cast spells will ensure you will get the trigger off your commander. As I said in that other video, if you're making a Lulu deck, the most important thing here is I gotta make sure I have a permanent that left the battlefield this turn. Even if it's just I sacrifice my Evolving Wilds to go get a land, that is a permanent that has left the battlefield. So that means I will get my commander's trigger on the end step. That's really, really important. And of course, with Guild Artisan, you're not guaranteed to be getting the treasure tokens, but it's pretty easy to do. And that way, if I get the treasure tokens on combat, I will then have something that I can sacrifice. Even if I have nothing to cast, I'll just sacrifice a treasure token to make sure I get my commander's ability on the end step. So as I built that deck, what I started to realize is, okay, I got these treasure tokens that I can start doing a sacrifice artifact theme with. And the more I went down that road, again, I threw Goblin Welder in there because it's one of my favorite creatures of all time. And it just easily fit with the having stuff leave the battlefield. I have artifacts readily available to me that I can be using its ability with. So the more I went down that road, the more I realized, hey, wait a minute, I have a very similar deck to my Gerard deck. It's a red-white deck that is in sort of a sacrifice, a little bit of a recursion theme. I want stuff to be going to the graveyard. Goblin Welder, actually, funny enough, works really well with Lulu because it has a tap ability. So when I use it, it then untaps so I can use it again on my opponent's turn. I'm like, hold on, I think I got something here. And so this is the direction I went. I kept the deck mostly the same, okay? It is still essentially the same artifact recursion theme, sort of, that it was before. A lot of the cards that I had in there, of course, still did fit, but then I added a few bunch more as well. And also, I went with more of a treasure token theme than I had in my Gerard deck. Didn't really do a treasure token theme at all with my Gerard deck. In this deck, because I am regularly making treasure tokens, I built around that theme a little bit more. Prosperous Partnership is an absolute slam dunk here. 1 red and a white enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 green white citizen creature tokens. Tap 3 untapped creatures you control to create a treasure token. So of course, it's making treasure tokens. You got to tap 3 untapped creatures. That's not great, but wait a minute, my commander is untapping creatures. And of course, your commander is only going to put +1/+1 counters on creatures that are tapped. So you actually want your creatures to be tapped here, right? If I have my commander in play, I cast Prosperous Partnership, it creates those 2 tokens. I can immediately tap all those creatures down, my commander included, to create a treasure token. I can then sacrifice that treasure token if I wanted to cast something else, which will ensure that I get my Lulu trigger, and all those creatures will then untap on my end step, and I get to put a +1/+1 counter on each of them. And also, of course, I can use the Prosperous Partnership ability again on my opponent's turn. More added bonus here. I can now tap down those creatures again, maybe on the end step before my turn to create another treasure token. So just so much great synergy that was happening here. That's what got me excited about the deck. And I also ended up putting Magda Brazen Outlaw in the deck as sort of a secret commander, okay? I will just say I don't have a lot of dwarfs in this deck. I only have like 3. However, whenever a dwarf you control becomes tapped, create a treasure token, and I just need to tap down my Magda in order to create a treasure token. So it is is fitting there. It is fitting the theme of I want to tap down my creatures and I want to be creating treasure tokens. That part of the ability fits everything I'm doing in the deck. Even if Magda is the only dwarf I have, all I have to do is tap it, whether I'm attacking with it or using my Prosperous Partnership or some other option, I can now create the treasure token, which fits the treasure token theme. And then obviously it's going to get untapped and get a counter on it from my Lulu. And then of course, the last ability really plays into that because I am making a lot of treasure tokens in this deck. And if I get up to 5, I can now sacrifice 5 treasure tokens to search my library for an artifact card or a dragon card and put it directly onto the battlefield. And I do have a couple of great options there. Of course, Goldspan Dragon is a phenomenal dragon in any treasure token theme. I also have Portal to Phyrexia in there. Just some really big bangers that I can go cheat into play that also happen to fit, remember, the artifact recursion theme, right? I can have my Portal to Phyrexia come into play, force all my opponents to sacrifice creatures, then I can swap it out with my Goblin Welder if I want to and get that ETB again. And when it enters the battlefield again, I make them sacrifice 3 creatures. So I just really love all the neat little synergies I had here. And I really loved that it wasn't that difficult for me to just swap out my Gerard for Lulu and Guild Artisan and just a few other cards as well. I would say about maybe 30% of the deck I had to switch out, and I just made such a more fun, interesting deck with a commander that I really, really wanted to build a deck with. I'm really happy with the outcome here. So don't give up hope. If you have that deck that you really like, that you've sort of lost interest in, maybe try going in a little bit of a different direction. Sometimes though, I will warn you that if you start going in a different direction than what you originally started, you will do that. You know, in some of these cases, I ended up going in a different direction that I shouldn't have and then went back towards where I originally started, and that sort of rejuvenated the deck for me. And in other cases, the place I started wasn't really super great, so I ended up going in a different direction that worked a lot better. Either scenario might work for you in your decks as well. That is it for today though, and thanks for tuning in.